So we're doing primitive electronics 3. I didn't give this much thought. I just went like these are two records I just listened to, so it's easy to slot into primitive electronics.
All right. Well, I don't know that I did anything significantly different from that. I've got some minimal electronics. I believe it's now being marketed as minimal wave from 45 years ago, 1980.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm starting to run out of records that might qualify, but I've got a few. I've got one, I don't know, how would you put it? The Platonic Ideal of a Primitive Electronics album, maybe. Um, and I've got one that's a real outlier, kind of random, arguably doesn't belong in the category.
All right. So my first record is these two lovely folks, Ellie, right here, and Jacques right there, a real life couple making real life music together. They actually started in this kind of punkish band with their friends called the Stinky Toys in the late 70s. I think it was basically a high school band, but I've got that record, although I'm not crazy about it. It's all guitars and drums and brash teenage attitude. Uh, Here, though, they've grown up and yeah, adopted this very cool demeanor, as you can see, not to be fazed by anybody, and make really great minimal electronic music. So it's just synthesizers, live drums, but very sparingly arranged, and her singing over it. And they're just these impeccably crafted little miniatures uh, of sentiment, just going over standard pop themes like, holding hands and not caring what other people say and stuff like that. But it's so sparse and stripped down and skeletal even that it's kind of got it avoids being cloying and sentimental. It's instead just very Parisian and chic. Um, Jacques No also wrote a bunch of songs for other people, including Leo, who's another one of my favorite sort of pop performers from the era. If you can get your hands on Amoureux Solitaire, it's got this really great song. It's basically, and there's a great video on YouTube too, where you have this kind of tartlet hopping around in practically nothing, talking about how sad life is and how she wants to be lied to just to have the sort of prospect of there being any kind of meaning to it. It's very existential and Gallic. All right, so primitive electronics, right, and it qualifies as primitive electronics because you'll hear a total of, well, it's just a keyboard being used in the most minimalist kind of way possible. And from 1980, uh, anything that they put out and anything that he has his hand in is going to get my recommendation. So that's item number one. Then the other gem comes from a few years before that, and this is Mort Garson's Black Mass Lucifer album. But what we have here is a an electronic journey into the netherworld. There's also a great pentagram on the background, but you can't see it very well. Well, in fact, you can't see it at all, but a goat's head there in the pentagram. And I think that Wendy or perhaps Walter at the time, I don't know exactly when the switch occurred between the two, but Wendy or Walter, Carlos was probably listening to this a lot when she or he made the soundtrack to The Shining. Mort Garson made a bunch of albums, and they're all worth checking out, including one for plants that I think has been reissued recently. Um, but he's kind of got an eclectic approach, and here he goes to the darker side of things, and it's a welcomely chilling experience. Okay, so those are my two. I will yeah, punt the ball to Chris.
All right. Thank you, Eric. So my first one is Wizards by J.D. Emanuel from 1982. Um, this is the one that I said was sort of the platonic ideal of a primitive electronics album. So J.D. Emanuel was, you can go to his Bandcamp page. He's put out, I don't know, a couple of dozen albums. Um, he's one of those new age electronica people who says that his music is intended to, bring on like a deep meditative harmonic state, that kind of thing. Um, the record itself, maybe it came out on cassette originally, but it's you know, this is a reproduction of the original, but it's your classic private press kind of new age. This is just like photocopied cardboard for the art. Nothing on the back. The record itself, also nothing. And he considers this his best work, and it's also probably his most acclaimed. He said that he wrote it. Essentially, he was inspired by Terry Riley, and you can definitely hear that in this record. It sounds like a lot of Terry Riley's early stuff, except less composed. More like this was recorded in a home studio kind of thing. And Terry Riley's stuff didn't really sound like that. A lot of Terry Riley's stuff sounded like the guy had studied a lot of theory. And this doesn't really come across like that. This comes across as wonderfully drifty new age electronica. And it's great stuff. My second, here's the random one, is the Dead's second album from 1967, Anthem of the Sun. Their history, when they began, they were a true psychedelic band. They were soundtracking the acid tests and all that other hippie history, fodder for a million YouTube documentaries. But this record is probably the highest expression. It's like the peak of their psychedelic period, appropriately enough. Came out in 67. I guess the backstory here, they had been signed to Warner Brothers because, Warner wanted to get in on the psychedelic gold rush, specifically the San Francisco gold rush. And the Dead were kind of given carte blanche to do what they wanted. Warner's really wanted like another Jefferson Airplane or something, or maybe the Doors or whatever. And the Dead most definitely didn't give them that. But the Dead were turned loose in the studio, and they terrorized and fought with the producers, and they taught themselves how to work the studio. I guess they also worked themselves into a huge debt to the label because they spent a ton of time. This is sort of a glorious mess of an album, really. They recorded stuff in the studio, and then like within songs, they mixed it with live recordings that they had. So the sound quality is kind of all over the place. There's like muffled parts, and then parts that are really clear. The musicianship though is always really good. There's parts that are kind of like noisy, and there's like prepared piano out of John Cage. They throw kind of everything at the wall in this record. The only song that maybe the casual Dead fan would really know is the other one, which became like a live staple. But it's a really cool record. And this original one, which I believe it's a beat up copy, but this is the original mix. The original mix was like more psychedelic, sort of crazier sounding. And I guess a few years later, Jerry Garcia went back into the studio and he remixed it to make it sound more, normal. But that's not this one. But I got to thinking about using this uh, for this topic because I was watching something on YouTube, and Jerry Garcia was being interviewed about this record, and he said that while they were in the studio, they were playing the studio like it was an electronic instrument. It's quite a trip. So that's my second one. Jackson, what do you got?
All right. Yeah, I have Black Moth Super Rainbow, which has these interesting collages for the cover. Crazy kind of stuff. Um, this is their third record. It's called Eating Us from 2009. And then it's been described as a psychedelic electronic indie rock project. They're from Pittsburgh. The guy that and the leader of this Black Moth Super Rainbow later became Tobacco, where he becomes more experimental. But this record itself, although it seems like a stretch, it's got a secret ingredient, the vocoder, which ties the whole thing together. There's no real lyrics that stand out, but that vocoder voice is pulsing through it. They also hired a synthesizer artist who goes by the name of the Seven Fields of Aphelion to augment this. So it's got clean and dirty recorded instruments that are sort of combined throughout the whole record. So it's got a real consistent sound using synths, guitars, Rhodes piano, and the vocoder. When I listen to it, I feel queasy, unhinged, off kilter. It messes with my equilibrium. It sort of comes and goes as far as that ballast of feeling comfortable. It's melodic, but never syrupy. So, in describing that, this guy used to have a band called SSC, which stood for Satan Stomping Caterpillars, and that pretty much describes the melodic tone of this record in general. Let's see. So, this would be a great addition to any offbeat indie collection or a great party mood piece. I've played it at parties, it works. People start hovering above the ground. And next I have Piero Umiliani and his oscillators. So that's what it's credited as. Musica dell'era tecnologica, which in the Italian translation is music of the technological age. From 1972 in Italy. This is a library record that was recorded for the Sound Workshop Studios of Rome and was never released until its reissue. So it was music for film, television, and radio, reissued by Dago Red not so long ago, and is a highly sought out title. So it's definitely worthy. This is a flat-footed example of primitive electronics. It's experimental library music. It's both improvised and composed. It wasn't intended to be of a piece, but it does play as of a piece. Nothing here is robotic, and there's a lot of contrast between the melodic numbers and the more atmospheric, noisy numbers. But throughout, you have this raw synthesizer, the Moog synthesizer. So it goes from melodic to noise. It's repetitive with some traditional compositions, but mostly it is unwieldy with all the rough edges of the synthesizer showing through. So highly rated for anyone collecting 70s electronic or library. And I highly recommend it. And it's attainable.
Mystic Emissions. Thank you, Eric. You want me to tickle you? What do you want?
You couldn't have said that in a more checked out way.